So, there was like a kiddush in the shul, and people are talking, and they get into an argument. Okay? The argument is, what is more important, the sun or the moon? Okay, and this gets to be a really heated argument. There are your sun people and your moon people, and arguments on all sides. And they decide, well, we've got to go to the rabbi, and we'll accept his decision and let it be. Let's not argue. Okay, so they go to the rabbi, and the rabbi, we have to know what's more important, the sun or the moon. The rabbi says, obviously, the moon is more important. The sun shines when we have light. The moon shines when we need the light. Okay, I thought it was a good joke. But anyway, but it's a meaningful joke because it really has a lot of wisdom to it. The idea that, like we had just at Hanukkah, where we had the light within the darkness, we're in exile, and yet we see that there's a miracle and God is with us. So any little thing we can get when you're in the darkness is good. But when you're in the light, that is when everything is good. So who needs God? Everything's fine. God, we don't need you. We'll talk to you when we need you. And of course, that is an error. And actually, it's related to another joke, since we're still early, which actually Rabbi Gottlieb is, has a way of saying this joke here and there. So, a fellow has a startup, and there's somebody who wants to buy him out, and it should be a great deal, and make a fortune. But they're very particular about his being on time, and he's trying to get to the meeting in Tel Aviv and find a parking space. It's practically impossible. So he says, "Okay, Hashem, please, Hashem, find me a parking place. If you find me a parking place, I'll learn 3 dapim of Gemara a day. Hashem, if you find me a parking place, I'll give maaser tafim all the time, and so on and so on." And then suddenly he sees a parking place. Oh, it's okay. God, I found one. So he doesn't need God anymore. He's got the parking place. So it's the same idea that when things are working out well, then we're less likely to pray or to feel that we need God. We could also, I guess.
Daf Yomi this week.
What's that?
That's Daf Yomi this week. If you're making that there, and I didn't really mean it. It's only to spur of the moment, so you don't have to smevatel.
Uh-huh. Okay, well, I'm doing Daf Yomi Yerushalmi. I'm not that about it.
No, I'm sure if you do a study between, wealthy Western societies versus, Africa or very poor places, the connection to God is probably greater with people who need the connection. And so in the Western world, it's hard to make that connection. You turn your tap on, you get water. You need food, you go to the store. And our needs are met.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you're right. So that's the challenge of affluence when things are going well. Okay. So anyway, enough for that joke and that idea. But we can review a little bit already on what we've been talking about. We're talking about, of course, the process outside of time of creation, and we've gone through the sfirot of Keter, the crown, and Chokhmah, wisdom, and Bina, Tiferet, Bina, understanding, and now we're getting to Tiferet and Malchut, the last two. And so we're reading in section 6 now. And no, I'm sorry, we're not reading in section 6. We should be writing, I got the wrong document here. We should be still in section 5. MC, stop share. Okay. Let me get the right document. As for this is, how do I do this? Oh, I have to do it from here. Share screen, and then call it over here. Now, why did that happen? That's right. Okay.
You can scroll down. Once you have the document up, if it's the same document, just scroll down to section 5 or scroll up.
I know I can do that, but I'm just checking here to see that perhaps there's been some mix-up in my documents. I just want to check that out. I see. Okay. Section 6. So, am I sharing anything at this point? This is.
You're still in section 6. Can you?
It's section 7 already, so that's not good. Yeah, I see what the problem is now. Okay, just 1 second. Sorry. Share screen. And over here. Okay, right. Yeah, you're right. I was in the right document. I got to scroll up. Okay. I didn't realize that. Yeah, so the section 5 is a long section. That's why I'm scrolling all the way back here to Baal Hasulam here, the beginning. And yeah, so I just want to read here in the beginning that by Chochmah we said that all the light was closed in the vessel of the desire to receive, and the desire to receive is nullified by the light. So the light and the vessel are created together, and there's all the light. In Bina, we cut off ourselves from the light, don't want to use the light of Chochmah, and instead receive the light of Chasidim. And we talked about the difference between the light of Chasidim, which is the pleasure we get in our service of God, and the light of Chochmah, which is the pleasure we get in our connection and receiving wisdom from God. Now we're going to begin with Tiferet. So Tiferet is the vessel that receives the light of Chasidim, as did Bina, but it has also a bit of Chochmah, illumination of Chochmah. And then with Malchut, we'll see that once again to get all of the Chochmah, and it has no desire to give, only desire to receive. That's
Aryeh, when we're talking about we receive, we're talking about our free neshama before we physically come into existence. In other words, we're describing how we got to be where we are today, where we are now. And this is how we got here. And our spiritual existence preceded us getting here. And now we're understanding that. Is that what's going on? And when you say we received, we weren't around at that time, right? We only had, or only our neshama was there. And then we become into existence at a certain later time.
Okay, and so let me say a few things. It was an excellent question, and thank you for helping me to make this point. First of all, once again, we're not talking about any time whatsoever. Okay, so it's not at that time. Okay, but you could say at this stage in the process, a sort of logical process that we're unraveling from understanding God as being the creator who wants to be benevolent and give to his creation. That's the purpose of creation. And out of that, then we see the necessity in that there being a receiver, and the qualities of that receiver are what we saw in the Sfirot of Keter and Chochmah and Bina, how that transforms. So we're now trying to describe how we get to a complete vessel that only wants to receive. We said that the nature of creation, like the chidush, what is new in the creation that wasn't in God, is the desire to receive. So we want to see how that desire, the great desire to receive, gets created and experienced. And all this is actually taking place in what is called the world of Ein Sof, the world of the infinite, before we even talk about the soul. In a little while, after we complete with Malchut, then we'll begin again, and we'll talk about the different worlds and how they relate to the same characters that we've seen with the different Sfirot, with these 5 Sfirot that we're talking about, which really, as we'll see, actually comprise 10 Sfirot. But we haven't gotten to that, so we haven't really gotten even close to the soul, the neshama, yet. We're only in a place where we're describing something which can never be experienced directly. We're only extrapolating from what we know about what we can experience, even in the higher spiritual worlds, and assuming that that took place in the process of creation in the world of Ein Sof, where everything is godly. And even the last view of Malchut, we see, is godly. But there'll be something that takes place, and we'll talk about that in the Malchut, in the last Sfirah of the Ein Sof, which creates then another sort of character entirely to reality. And then we get all the different 5 worlds, from what's called Adam Kadmon, the primal man, and Atzilut, the emanation, and Bria, creation, Yitzirah, formation, Malchut, Alam Malchut, Alam Hazeh, the last final world. And so we haven't gotten yet there. So we're not, this is somewheres in, if you will, God's soul. We're describing characters of God, but we have no way of accessing this kind of reality that we're discussing. But the qualities that we're discussing are the same qualities that exist in everything. Maybe you're like familiar with the idea of fractals, sort of geometric shapes, that if you open it up and go within, you see within that shape that the micro shape is the same shape as the macro shape. And then you can go in further and further and further. So it's like this too. We're seeing 5 different characters from Keter to Malchut of godliness, if you will, consciousness, if you will. And those characters are everywhere in creation. Wherever you touch, you'll find those 5 characters. And that's why we're studying it, just to understand those different characters that make up creation in this process of creation that we're discussing. Is that clear?
Okay.
Okay.
Can you make the letters a little bit bigger, Aryeh?
Oh, right. How do I do that?
The bottom right of your screen, you can make it bigger.
Oh, yeah. Right. That's right. Thank you. You're great. Really appreciate it. Okay.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks. Thank you.
Got it. Got it.
Okay.
That's okay. Well, it's a little bit too much, no?
That's good.
Okay, good. Okay. So, and now we're in the 3rd mode. You said Bina at the end realized that it can't do without Chokhmah at all. They gave several reasons why it's the case. And one of them is because Chokhmah is what gives life. And so we need some a little bit of Chokhmah in order to live. This is what's necessary. And so at the end of Bina, it wants to emanate or receive Chokhmah, or use the Chokhmah that it has, at least what is necessary for life. And that causes a transformation in the character of the Sphira. So we give it a different name. And now it's the Sphira of Tiferet, okay, which is called the aspect of Chasadim, Beherat Chokhmah. Chasadim, the light of benevolence, with a bit of illumination of the light of wisdom, which is necessary. And it's also necessary because that is the purpose of creation, that the light should be received. So we can't stay in a place of not receiving Chokhmah. So there's a beginning here in Tiferet of moving towards the realization of that purpose of creation, that the created being should receive the light. Okay? So the letter Tiferet, the spirit Tiferet corresponds to the letter Vav, he says in the tetragrammaton. And I'll stop sharing this for a second, and I'll share the table correspondences that I made. And so if we're here now in Tiferet, I opened it up, but I didn't share it. I do this again. Okay, correspondences. Okay. So here the Tiferet corresponds to the letter Vav, we're saying, which a Vav, of course, is a letter that has drawing down. So it's connecting down from above, from the Creator down into the lower worlds. Now we're getting closer to this world and bringing down a bit of the light of Chokhmah. And it sort of relates in terms of our body with the nose. Okay. Now, as long as I'm here, I'll scroll down. I made another table. What's interesting about Tiferet is that it includes within it 6 sub-spherot. Okay, if Tiferet is the general sphera, then there are some particular spherot within Tiferet, and like I say, you can always go deeper and deeper within the Tiferet of the Tiferet, and there's another Tiferet, and there's 10 within that, and so on and so forth, as far as you want to go ad infinitum. Now, why is it important to say this? Because we said that there was 10 spherot, and we're really only listing 5. We said Keter, Chokhmah, Bina, Tiferet, and Malchut. So that's only 5. Where are there 10 sphirot? There are 10 sphirot because the sphira Tiferet is actually 6. It's a system of 6. So we have the 4 other sphirot, and the 6 make together 10. And the 10 sphirot of Tiferet are perhaps familiar to those of you who familiar with the sphirot. There's Chesed, loving kindness, Gvura, strength, Tiferet, beauty, Netzach, eternity, hold, glory, and Yesod, foundation. These are different qualities, different midot. And when we talk about like the 6 days of creation, also in Kabbala, it's referring to these 6 different characters that we have here. Now, why do we have this 6? Well, we said, and why is it that the sphirot of Tiferet have a different name than Tiferet? Like, there are sub-sphirot of Chokhmah also, and that's the Keter of Chokhmah, and the Chokhmah of Chokhmah, and the Bina of Chokhmah, and the Tiferet of Chokhmah, and the Malchut of Chokhmah. Those are the sub-sphirot of Chokhmah, but they have the same name. They don't have a different name. But the Keter of Tiferet has a special name. It's called Chesed. Why? Well, Tiferet, we said, only has a little bit of Chokhmah. it just has, what's called a heron, just a small amount, illumination of Chokhmah. And so the sub-spherot are not really fully with the character that their name says. And so the Keter of Tiferet doesn't have a full character of Keter. It's just an illumination of Keter, of Tiferet. And because of that, we want to give it a different name to indicate this is not the full Keter. It's just illumination of the Keter, because Tiferet itself is just an illumination. And so we give it a name, Chesed. And the Chokhmah of Tiferet is Gvura. And the Bina of Tiferet is called Tiferet. And the Tiferet of Tiferet is called Netzach, just to get you confused. And the Malchut of Tiferet is called Od. And the Yesod is a sixth one, which is just sort of a bucket that is sort of includes all of the five. Okay, so that's the system of six, and why we have indeed 10 spherot, even though we're only discussing 5. Now let's go back to our text here. So it says here that the character of light is called the light of Chasadim with the illumination of Chokhmah, as I said, because the majority of the light is Chasadim, and the lesser part is a light of Chokhmah. So the Tiferet is coming from Bina, which had the light of Chasadim. So Bina is sort of like the mother of Tiferet, which is like the child of Bina. And so it has a similar character to its mother. It's also basically giving and benevolent. But Tiferet, because it has a certain amount of Chokhmah, so it has some kind of unity between these two aspects. And it says here, Tiferet unifies the two opposites of light, Chokhmah and Chasadim. And this is a beauty, this harmony between these two contrasting lights. The beauty of the Sphira is the harmony of these two lights shining in union. The light of Chokhmah intensifies our sense of self. That's the general idea of Chokhmah, to be connected to God, and that gives us a sense of greatness. And Chasadim lessens our sense of self, since we are annulling ourselves in service to God and making really God's will our will. And that's why we receive the light of Chassidim. There's joy in that service. So,
Aryeh, now I would interrupt to say we're talking about now the human being, us. But you said he hasn't been created yet. We're not there yet.
You're absolutely, you're right. I thought that way, because these aspects also exist at the later stage, like I said. So these aspects are within our soul, yes. Right now, I'm describing it in the process of creation, which is beyond the level of our soul, but we also have that within our soul and you're right, our service and everything. But all these things are rooted in the characters that exist within the world of Ein Sof, which is what we're describing now. So we're driving that character, and you're right that I'm also, if you will, also slipping up, if you will, referring to how it exists within our experience and how we can relate to that. Otherwise, we won't know what we're talking about. So it exists in both places, okay? And now, when I discuss the idea of the pleasure that there is in service, you're right, we're talking about our experience in that way, okay? But that's now something which is extrapolated to be in the world of Ein Sof. So we talked about Chokhmah and Chasadim being in harmony, and that's beautiful, and that's what the meaning of the word Tiferet is, beauty, and that's why it's called that. Now, what's the difference between Bina and Tiferet? Since they're both aspects of giving desire of Chasadim, the difference is that Tiferet also desires some light of Chokhmah, as we said. Okay, because it's impossible to live without it. And the main aspect is Chasidim, the lesser aspect is Chokhmah. And it says in Ecclesiastes, in Kohelet, that the person's wisdom illuminates his face. Right? And, we have an image of Moshe Rabbeinu. Moses had a light that was being illuminated from his face, but in Tiferet is just a small amount, and so Tiferet is sometimes called Zer Anpin in Aramaic, which means small face. Okay, so Tiferet and Zer Anpin are the same thing, and the name Tiferet has to do with the beauty of the harmony, and the name Zer Anpin, or a small face, has to do with the fact that there's just a small amount of Chokhmah. Okay, so that's the sphere of Tiferet. Now, following that comes the fourth mode, which is the letter Hey of the tetragrammaton, the last letter of God's name, and this is called Malchut. And the vessel of the third mode of Tiferet, in its end stage, Baal Hasulam says, is also aroused to draw forth the light of Chokhmah in its full measure, as was the case in the first mode. It's sort of like a situation where you can't eat just one. You know, it was so good, the pleasure that there was in getting the light of Chokhmah that was just necessary, that it arouses the desire for more. And so it says that it's also aroused, right? Because both Bina and Zer Anpin were aroused at the end, right? Bina was aroused at the end to get a little bit of Chokhmah, and Zer Anpin is aroused at the end to draw forth a lot of Chokhmah, all the Chokhmah, okay? Right, and this is all the Chokhmah that originally shined in the sphere of Chokhmah, and this gives rise to our Malchut, which desire to receive is equal to desire to receive in Chokhmah. So at its end, Zer Anpin was of all the light of Chokhmah, because the pleasure is one thing that it was so good it wanted more, and second of all, there was a realization, as I said before, that the purpose of creation cannot be fulfilled only by a minimal illumination of Chokhmah, but rather we have to get all the light of Chokhmah. That's what God wanted, that we'd have all the pleasure that there is in sharing in his quality of desire to give and being united with God and having that light of wisdom. So, and we must receive all of that. And indeed, the Malchut in the world of Ein Sof receives all of the light. It has a desire for all the light, and it receives all the light. And this is similar to what we had in the sphere of Chokhmah, where it desired all the light and received all the light. But what's the difference? The difference is, now that we've experienced a lack of Chokhmah, when Bina rejected the light of Chokhmah and did not want to use it, then we can awareness of the existence of the desire to receive, the awareness of the vessel. And so now that the vessel is filled with light, it's not annulled like it was before. It still has a self-awareness that it is receiving the light, even though now it's receiving all the light. Now, let's see what our comments here that I wrote on the basis of what Rav Gottlieb wrote. Bina previously repelled the light of Chokhmah. So the vessel is separated from the light and develops a great longing for the light. Because of this longing, when the light returns to the vessel, it no longer nullifies the vessel like it did in Chokhmah. So now there are experienced two distinct entities. There is the vessel and the light, right? And so then, well, why doesn't it though annul it? It doesn't annul it because there's still a memory, still an awareness of what it was, that it had this vessel and it still has this vessel for the light. So that's the difference between Chokhmah and Malchut. Now, it says here, Baal Hasulam says, as discussed above, after the extension of light and then its departure, the vessel is set in its final form. That's how we create a vessel. We have an extension of light, then departure of light, and we'll see if we continue on in this process of creation, which goes on through all the worlds, there is a constant process of extension of light and departure of light, extension of light and departure of light. And that's how the process proceeds in order to create the final vessel. And then for the fixing, so to speak, of that vessel, the healing of that vessel, of the separation of that vessel from the light, from the Creator, and creating union once again. So light departs only for the benefit of creation. Light departing, we're in darkness, we're in exile, we're disconnected from God. But this is actually for a benefit, because it develops a vessel that can later fully experience the light and get pleasure then from that experience. Having lacked the light and then receiving it, that creates the pleasure in receiving it, and that's what God wants. So we need to first have the light in order to taste what it is, and that's the extension of light. And then the light has to depart so that we can long for it. And then the light, once again, will be extended so then we can really appreciate receiving it. Now, when we talk about the light departing or being extended, that's not exactly correct. Okay, light doesn't actually depart. The divine light is always in a state of absolute rest. Right? Light is light. God is not changing. Right? It says, "Ani Hashem lo shaniti." God, I don't change. So God is not changing. Sometimes gives the light, sometimes doesn't give the light. It's not the light being extended and departing. It's really the vessel, right? So the meaning of the light departing is that the vessel doesn't sense the light anymore. Everything we're discussing in terms of the vessel's experience. Since the vessel no longer experiences the light, it is as if the light departed. And so we talk in a way which is as if, because that's simpler, and then we'll continue to do that. But it should be understood that, to be more precise, the light doesn't change, and it's the vessel that changes. So these terms then describe our perception, or the perception of the vessel. And why is it that the light is not received? Because it's the desire to receive, because there is a sense of self which is separate from God, and then we cut ourselves off and we have this what's called cloudy vision. So our selfish desire to receive clouds our experience, and we cannot perceive.
Just a question. Where did the sense of self come from? Did we discuss that? Where did we get the sense of self? When did that happen in this process?
Well, when I say a sense of self, I say the sense of desire to receive. That we have a desire to receive. I'm not talking about the individual soul, okay? I'm talking in general about, a created being, or emanated being, okay? Having a sense. And so it has a sense of its desire to receive the moment that the light departs. Remember that the light departed originally because Bina made a choice not to be a receiver. Had a constant, and because it wanted to be like the light that it was receiving, which had a quality of selfless giving. So Bina was, so then it didn't have the light, or it didn't use the light of Chokhmah. And so it had a sense of its desire, in this sense, in this case, a desire to give. And then later arises more the desire to receive, we said. And then we have Tiferet. And then even more now has aroused the desire to receive in Malchut. And the awareness of that desire to receive is what I'm calling the awareness of self. Okay? That means I want to receive me, right? And that's what's important. I see the receiving to be important. My receiving to be important. Later on, as we get further in the process, we're talking about, individual soul. So, it's like aryehsiegel, I want to receive, and I'm taking from other people. Okay, but here in general, it's just the idea of receiving. That gives a sense of the created being separate from the creator, who is all desire to give. Okay? Okay, so I was saying here that it's the selfless desire, the desire to give selflessly, is available too. If we purify our soul, then we can experience that, and that's the process of our work that is done after this process of actually creating the vessel in the first place. Okay, so Baal Hasulam says, and after the light returns, afterwards, and the vessel again receives the light, we find that the vessel precedes the light. That is, the awareness of the desire precedes the receiving of the connection with God, which is the light, which that is what was desired. And therefore, this fourth mode is seen to be the completion of the vessel, and it's called Malchut, okay, which means kingship. And the Malchut that we're discussing here, because it has complete 100% desire to receive, so it has no aspect of giving. Okay, it's as though there's only, like, you could have 100% of desire. Okay, and you can divide that up like the ferret is, to a certain extent desire to give, to a certain extent desire to receive. But if you have 100% desire to receive, then you have 0% desire to give. And that's the Malchut that we're describing here, the Malchut in the world of Ein Sof. Okay. Now, Malchut is said to be, because it has this desire to receive, it is the true vessel. And the sefirot that we discussed up until now are really just those that emanate further the light of God, but they are not fully receiving. Okay. Now Malchut is now really receiving. It's a vessel that's finally receiving. And there's four meanings that we can give to the Malchut, the name. Okay, it literally means kingship, and therefore alludes to the control exhibited by a king. And the main attribute of Malchut is, as we said, the desire to receive pleasure or benefit, and this controls our ability to be connected to the Creator. The more that we desire to receive, and that's what rules us, then we are different in character from the Creator, who is the desire to give selflessly. So, to the extent that this controls us, to that extent we are separated from the Creator. We can experience the Creator only by separating from the desire to receive and overcoming that and developing the desire to give. So Malchut then refers to control, like a king, and here we're talking about how the desire to receive controls us. Okay, but a second way, although, of understanding this idea of control is in some ways just the opposite. It's the self-control. That is the ability to overcome the desire to receive. Since without self-control, we cannot become attached to God's light. And the spiritual worlds are designed to enable us to experience the divine light. So we experience the light to the extent that giving becomes more important to us than receiving, and this is controlled by Malchut. So that's another reason to call it Malchut, this idea of control, this time self-control. And then there is a reason to call it Malchut because the kingship, the Malchut of God, is revealed within the Sphira since it receives all of God's light, right? And look, and that's like the greatness of God, the kingship of God is there in its God's light, God's desire to give selflessly. So the kingship of God is the supremacy of God's desire to give goodness to his created beings, and that's what's experienced within Malchut, and so it could be called Malchut. And then finally, there's the idea of accepting the yoke of the kingdom of heaven. Right? We say Malchut Shamayim, the kingship of heaven. So, and so Sphira Malchut is also, see later, not at this stage, but it's later, it's the root of all the limitations that we place on ourselves, as we saw before about the self-control. But here the idea is not just self-control, but the idea of annulling ourselves to the will of God, right? Accepting the yoke of the kingdom of heaven means that God's will is our will, okay? And that is also an aspect of Malchut, which will be clearer later on. And here it says that the limitations that Malchut places on the receiving harness our desire to do as we please, and instead enable us to do only what is required in order to connect to God. Okay, so that's some of the reasons why that's called Malchut. So we've completed now going through the 5 Sphirot from Keter, Chochmah, Bina, Tiferet, Malchut, and these are once again the 5 qualities which in Kabbala seem to be different qualities of God. Of course, again, it's not polytheism. We're not talking about 5 different gods. But we recognize to the extent that we can discern in godly qualities, these are qualities that God has created in this world and reflect then upon God's qualities himself. And everything in the world has these qualities. So now we're going to see how these qualities then appear within the different worlds that there are. After the world of Ein Sof, then there is beneath that a world is called Adam Kadmon, primal man, which is related to the sphere of Keter, has the quality of Keter, but we're not going to talk about that. Baal Hasulam doesn't talk about that right now. Later on, he will go into detail about that, but not now. But then we have the other worlds, Atzilut, Bria, Yetzirah, Asiyah, and they now will be discussed beginning with the world Atzilut. So first I'll read what Baal Hasulam said, okay? So the 4 aspects mentioned above constitute the sod, the mystery of the 10 Sphirot that can be distinguished in every emanated being and every created being, both in all of
It's only not for everybody.
I'm sorry?
Is it everybody or only Jews?
Is it everybody or?
Only who did it, only Jews.
Oh, no. It's, we'll see. He specifically says everything, even animals and whatever, everything. You always have these qualities in every single thing. Even things, that are, not alive as far as we see it. Everything has that quality, but certainly everything that we see as having any sense of soul has that quality, and really, there's a soul in everything. Okay. So we're talking about everything, all general being, and that is the four spiritual worlds, and also in the smallest detail of what exists. So the first aspect is called Chokhmah, the world of Atzilut. The second aspect is called Bina, the world of Riyah. Third aspect is called Tifer, the world of Yisirah. And the fourth aspect is called Malchut, or the world of Asiyah. That was what I was looking for before, the word, not the Olam of Malchut, Olam Asiyah, the world of doing. Okay? So Atzilut can be translated as emanation, and Bria as creation, Yitzhira as formation, and Asiyah as doing. And maybe I'll stop sharing this. I'll go once again. I'll share the table of correspondences, and you can see that. So you have here Adam Kadmon, which goes with Keter, and Chokhmah, Atzilut, and Bria, Yitzhira, and Asiyah. Okay. And again, they're related to the letters. The tip of the Yud is the Adam Kadmon, and the Yud Hey Vav Hey, the worlds, four worlds. Okay, that's that. I think I'm getting better at this now. Okay. Now, to give an explanation of these four aspects, now we're talking about function every soul. Okay, that's what we're doing. So now he's talking about the soul. When this, but we've described now the different aspects, and now we'll see the aspects within the soul. When the soul is drawn forth from Ein Sof and comes to the world of Atzilut, and it goes through all these worlds, right? It is in the first aspect of the soul. Okay, there the soul is not yet called Neshama. Right, that's only in the world of Bria. We'll see that we call the soul Neshama. It's because this name, the name Neshama, indicates that there is some separation from the emanator. By means of such a separation, the soul would depart from the aspect of Ein Sof and come to be revealed as an independent domain. As long as the soul does not have the form of a vessel, there is nothing separating it from the essence of God to merit having its own name. So I already explained, the world of Atzilut, its emanation, corresponds to Chokhmah. And we said that Chokhmah had the character of being totally passive. It desires to receive, but it has no longing because it was created already with what it desired together with it. It has all the light together with the desire to receive. So it has no consciousness of receiving. It has no consciousness of being a vessel for receiving. So it doesn't have any consciousness of any separation. Okay? And as we'll see later, the word Atzilut also comes from the word Etzel, to mean by. So the world of Atzilut is very close to God. It's Etzel, God. Okay, so that's something regarding today. But let me complete reading what Baal Hasulam says before we go to discuss what he's saying here. You already know that in the first aspect, that was Chokhmah, the vessel is completely nullified by the light, is not recognized as a vessel. This is the sod or mystery of the world of Atzilut being complete godliness, and the mystery of he, his life, and himself are one. Okay? When you say he, God's essence, and his life refers to his light that emanates from God, and also the vessels that God creates himself, all these are actually one. We're making distinctions here and distinguishing between them, but really it's all one. And in the world of Atzilut in particular, we're in total unity with God, so close to God. It's very, very high level. So this oneness is experienced. And even the souls of other forms of life, when they pass through the world of Atzilut, because all souls come from God, right? That's passed through all the worlds. When they pass through the world of Atzilut, are considered unified with God's essence. So everything, all forms of life, certainly, has a soul and is connected to God and has this high soul. But the world of Atzilut, as we said here, is not yet neshama, not yet the soul in the sense of being an individual soul, because it's totally united with God. Forgive me, I want to once again share that table because I think you can see here that I listed the different names of the lights. The sphirot are like the vessels, and the lights are, you may be familiar with the words nefesh, ruach, neshama, haya, and yechida, right? Sometimes referred to as Naran Chai, which is the acronym for that. Whereas the nefesh is the lowest part of the soul that's connected to malchut, or the lam of doing, lam of asiyah, and ruach is connected with tiferet, and the neshama is connected with the lam of bria and the sphera of bina, which we said bina was the first separation because it decided not to receive the light. It was an individual action independent of what God was emanating. And so it created a certain separation. So that gets the name Neshama. But at the level of Atzilut, the level of soul or the lights is called Chaya, which means life. And at the highest level is called Yechida, or like total unity and oneness, and it's like Yechida sometimes means unit, but here is like the idea of complete oneness with God. So that's where we are at this stage. We're now discussing the Olamai Atzilut, which in the Zohar, for example, the main book of the Kabbala, so you see, it only touches on the Olam of Atzilut. It doesn't even so much get to Olam of Atzilut. It's really dealing more with the Olam of Bria. So Atzilut is a very, very, very high level.
Aryeh, are we supposed to, we individual people, Jews, supposed to come back to the Olam of Atzilah? Do we go back there, or are we going to go back somewhere else when we realize all giving, that we will be, that we become all giving? Where do we return?
Well, as far as in terms of our experience, which is called hasaga, due to what we can directly perceive, it's only the lower levels of Atzilut, okay? Not even the higher levels of Atzilut. And of course, beyond that, there's still Adam Kalmon, and there's Ein Sof. But we can get to, talking about people like, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and Baal Hasulam, it's very, very special people, maybe get to a certain aspect of Atzilut. Okay?
And where do we get to, other people?
Other people, we're just hanging out here in
where
the world of doing.
Where's our goal? Where is our goal in this system?
Our goal is to get as high as we can. We're aspiring to be united with God fully.
That's Atzilut. That's what I'm saying. That would be called Atzilut.
Yes. Again, the lower aspect of Atzilut. The higher aspect of Atzilut.
We have this idea that the people that went into Pardes did not do so well. So why do you think that is the goal? It sounds dangerous. I don't know.
It is definitely dangerous, and you have to be prepared, obviously. And that's why there's so many warnings here regarding the learning of the Kabbalah. In our day, it's been opened up much more, but it can very easily be distorted. See, people use this in order to, make money, first of all, and in other ways, and make themselves important. But really, the idea is to learn how to make God important, make the Shekhinah important, and to unite with that and to annul our individual desire to receive and increase our desire to give. That's really the work that we want to do. But when you see, some Kabbalists that are, making a lot of money off this thing, then you have to question what their intentions are exactly. If it's not in order to receive as opposed to in order to
Look, I get emails from people like Rabbi David Foreman or other rabbis, and you want to hear their Torah, you join up and you pay a fee. I mean, there's nothing nefarious about that. I mean,
no, I'm not saying it's not possible that it be fees or something like that if you want contributions or I don't know what. Because that's today, people have their business in teaching Torah, whatever that could be. But it's a question of the extent to which it's exploiting, people who, may come in need for a blessing or think that if they have this book in their home, then all their troubles will go away and things like that, to delude people into thinking there's some kind of magic that can take place here by being in contact with this person or these teachings or this book or whatever. So that's what one needs to be careful about. And so that's one aspect in which it's dangerous. And the other aspect in which it's dangerous is that because when one does have an aspect of revelation of God, it is so pleasurable. The joy is so great that we have to be careful that we don't become seeking the joy instead of seeking to be in relation with God and having the revelation, serving God. So, and that's why, people can go off because they start thinking that they are God or that they're special because they've had this revelation, or in some way become addicted to just having the pleasure from it and not losing actually the purpose of the whole thing. Those are kind of dangers that there are in this thing, and that then requires a clarity of purpose. And as we understand, we're not learning here now. Also, I appreciate actually the questions you're asking, because I see that you want to know, okay, how can I use this material in my service?
I'm curious why the Gemara comments that they don't want to teach Merkava, Ezekiel. They clearly don't want to do it. And we have a story of the people that went to party. Only Rabbi Akiva came out like complete. One dies, one goes crazy, one goes off the derech. And therefore, when Avi was asking, what is the ultimate goal? So we can't say we're on a higher madrega than those people.
No, but we are where we are, and we can move forward. And this material can assist us in getting clear about, first of all, what our aspirations are, and second of all, in what direction we want to move, because we know what those aspirations are. And the direction we want to move, again, I'll say it very clearly, we want to reduce our desire to receive and reduce our receiving and increase our desire to give without any reward and to actually do that. Okay. And that's, in general, the kind of path that we're discussing here. And we're seeing how that plays out in terms of understanding the qualities of our soul. And as we go on, we'll discuss more about, the particular avodah, or the service that one can do. So there's warnings about it, but nonetheless, it's worthwhile learning it, because without it, we cannot really come to fulfill the purpose that God wants. Like we said, we need to have the connection with God. That's what God wants us to have. So we have to be careful about that. We don't get off the derech that we think that, well, the experience is important and the Torah and mitzvot are not. And we don't suddenly go crazy and, think that, we're God or something like that. And what was the other problem that the guy, the person died? In other words, that the body becomes totally irrelevant and only the soul, and don't realize the importance of doing work within the body, and so leave this world. So those are dangers that there are. But having said that, then we can proceed gradually and hopefully pick up some wisdom from what we're learning here. Okay. So I was saying that this is not yet called neshama, because that indicates some separation, right? And neshama, besides meaning soul, also means breath, right? And since each person is breathing, within their life, like taking the air into their body and taking it out, so that it creates a certain separation, a certain independence, certain identity for the individual. And so this then shows that neshama alludes to some kind of independence. And it says here that this relates to that aspect of neshama which is experienced via the created being's desire to receive. Again, it should be noted that another aspect of neshama is experienced via the desire to give. Right? And this is the light of God within us, which we can attain as we develop spiritually. It is more available to us on Shabbat and will be fully revealed only with the ultimate completion of our spiritual refinement. So we begin by maybe coercing ourselves to be a little bit more giving and be more in service of God and wanting to be connected to God. And then we see that helps us to see that the pleasure there is in actually doing that, which creates a greater desire to give. And so we develop more and more spiritually and come to a place where our neshama is more united with God. I guess, we're going to need another section still. So by means of this separation, the soul would depart from the aspect of Ein Sof and come to be revealed as an independent domain. And Atzilut, we're not yet having a separation. So we're saying we're not in a separation yet. But if there was such a separation, then we would be like an independent domain. Independent action by a spiritual being indicates its identity and independence. In the sphere of Chokhmah, although the soul, so to speak, is born as consciousness of some sort, the vessel is full of light and nullified by the light. So there's not yet any action by the vessel or any self-awareness that develops in reaction to the light. That's Chokhmah, and that's Atzilut, right? So this is the mystery or the soul of the spiritual world of Atzilut being complete godliness. The progression of the spiritual worlds that Baal Hasulam is describing is from above to below. That's the process of creation. The progression of our spiritual work and development is from below to above. Right? We start with nefesh and with olam asiyah and work up higher. From above to below, Atzilut is the first stage. From below to above, Atzilut is the highest spiritual level we can attain. And it is a state of eternal love, and it's the supreme level of attaining union with God. And at this level, we recognize divine providence. We said everything is good, as being responsible for everything that takes place within our lives and in the world generally. And what we have seen as bad is now revealed to have been critical to our spiritual development. So God is only good and only does good, and that can be realized when we get to this tremendously high level of being in union with God in Olam Atzilut. And as I said before, I read before that God's essence, His light, His vessels, they're all one, they're united at this level. And I just finished with this last line that said, even the souls of other forms of life, when they pass through the world of Atzilut, are considered unified with God's essence. And so we see that animal souls also come from God's desire to give goodness, which is the source of all the lights. And God's light does not change, but all the differences are due to the differences of the vessels. The animal soul may be a different vessel than a human soul, but nonetheless, it has the connection with the Creator. And so much for today. I wish you all well. Have a good week. Take care.
Thank you, Aryeh. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.